Hello, welcome back to Marathon Man, where I'm going through Doctor Who from the very beginning, and you join me at what is possibly the most underrated story yet. I know I said in my last video that I realised how close to the end of Hartnell's time I was, but I think I can pinpoint this story as being the one where the first Doctor's era actively begins to wind down. And if I think ahead slightly, it isn't really until the moon base before things start to settle down again. We lose a companion in this story and the next, then we have the first trip in the TARDIS for two new companions, then the Doctor changes, then we have that Doctor's first story, then we meet a new companion, then we have that new companion's first adventure in the TARDIS. There's a lot of firsts and lasts in very quick succession. I am now firmly in the show's bumpy transitional period, and there's a case to be argued that it could be said to have gone as far back as Verity Lambert's departure, because things don't seem to have gone very smoothly since. And I find myself not really looking forward to the upcoming colossal shift as much as I have done before. In fact, I'd quite happily put it off for a while. Basically, I'm not ready to say goodbye to the first Doctor yet. Or Stephen, and while the latter does happen in this story, because of that sort of like sense of bumpiness that season 3 has had, it is quite welcoming just how traditional the Savages feels. Season 3 has been all over the place, with every story having had something thrown at it to make it stand out. Sometimes that's worked, and sometimes it hasn't. Here, the most radical departure, at the story's beginning at least, seems to be the scrapping of individual episode titles. We're not going to get those for a very long time. I suppose we can nominate this story as the first example of the Doctor as Legend trope. Every so often, the Doctor and his companions land somewhere and have to involve themselves in incident. Occasionally, the show will do backflips to make that happen, and then other times, like here, it finds more innovative ways of doing it. It's quite nice to see the Doctor welcomed as a celebrity, and to have the elders be expecting the Doctor and be familiar with his past adventures helps set the scene rather well. It also has the added benefit of the Doctor being on the good side of the bad guys to begin with, so no time is wasted on any infiltrations, so to speak. They arrive at the heart of the predicament, basically. Hartnell continues to, well, just be the boss. When the Doctor is explaining that he can't accept their gifts just yet because it would mean endorsing their way of life before he knows anything about them, I was actually marvelling at the big man's performance of it. Yeah, I may be a hero to you, but don't think that means I'm going to enjoy that. It's so typically Doctor that for the first time since maybe the Daleks' Master Plan, I feel like I'm actually watching proper traditional Doctor Who. As much as I've enjoyed some of the stories since then, it does feel like the show hasn't properly settled amidst all the backstage shenanigans and producer roulette. Here though, it feels like the show has gone, sorry about that, where was I? After a prolonged bout of eccentricity. At its roots, it's a very simple story of goodies versus baddies, and the Elders' actions are suitably horrific for the Doctor to rail against. Hartnell gives good outrage most of the time, but here he gets ample opportunity to show that off. Of course I oppose you is, in my opinion, one of the very best Doctor lines. Implicit within it is almost like, well, why would you think otherwise? I'm the Doctor and you're a bastard. It's seasoning like that that makes me feel like it's actually course corrected and we're now back to Doctor Who being proper Doctor Who. Frederick Jaeger's turn as Jano is one of the best we've had in ages, and his incredulity at the Doctor's outrage is very nicely played. Rather than going straight for fire and brimstone, Jano actually tries to make the Doctor see how reasonable it all is, because that is what he truly believes. It makes for an altogether more believable foe, and I commend the acting and the writing of it. It seems that while the Elders have indeed been watching the Doctor and his travels, they've actually learned very little from them, and I can't tell you how appropriate I found that watching the Savages in 2023 when I think of how little certain vocal and toxic corners of Doctor Who fandom seem to grasp the very show that they're watching. Since this marathon's begun, I've not really spoken about my own personal experiences with fandom or exactly where on the fence I sit about certain issues. But I like to think that they're fairly obvious in how I present myself. And by the end of this video, you'll be under no illusions as to exactly what I think. It might seem like a fairly recent thing, what with the castings of Jodie Whittaker and Ncuti Gatwa and Yasmin Finney and Jigs Monsoon having ruffled some feathers, but it's not really a recent thing, because for years now there were disparaging comments about the gay agenda, and there were even some fans who thought it was too much that the show had both Mickey and Martha at the same time. So it's not really a recent thing, and when you consider how many more different types of people that the show represents now, including black and female doctors and queer companions and supporting characters, these fans have watched and loved Doctor Who as I have, yet they seem to harbour sentiments that I feel are totally at odds with it, and it feels to me like they haven't really properly been watching. Oh, I really love this show about this benevolent alien that goes into the cosmos and meets people, and no matter how alien somebody is, they have to first prove themselves to be a monster before the Doctor thinks they are one, and fights for the underdog and fights off the oppressors. And it's such a really good message about kindness, compassion, about how to treat everybody you find with friendliness. His gay black friends can f*** off though. I never ever understood that. I've just never been able to understand why the character of the Doctor appeals to those sensibilities, and even though the story is 57 years old, it doesn't stop those fans being the elders in the savages. Wrong, ignorant, convinced that they're right, and a little bit arseholy. So there you go, definitively planted my flag. You know exactly where I sit in the Doctor Who fandom now. When the Doctor is put through the process, it's really rather upsetting for two reasons. Firstly, because, well, it's upsetting to watch it happen to the Doctor. And secondly, because it's clearly another way to indispose William Hartnell. When all he has to do in episode 3 is to lie on a table for a bit and then appear drained, it's enough to really piss me off. I've got so little time left with his Doctor, and they are still trying to sideline him. And as good as Jaeger is at inflecting his performance with little Hartnellisms, and he is very good at it, still, no thank you. More of the Doctor, please, not less. While this story may blow hot and cold with its treatment of its leading man, giving him both short and long straws in seemingly alternate episodes, it also does one thing I never thought Doctor Who would actually do, and that is, it begins to treat Dodo like a proper person. She has fire in her belly in this, and it works. It even offers a nice glimpse to what she might have been like had she been treated as a real character from the start. It's an insight into a stronger Dodo, one we haven't been allowed to meet up until this point. The scene where she and the Doctor gleefully assist in destroying the laboratory is glorious. Most importantly, she reacts totally correctly when it's time to say goodbye to Stephen. For yes, this is Peter Purvis's final bout as a companion that all too few people realise was brilliant. It's a fitting exit too. To stay behind to mediate a potentially volatile situation and ensure a peaceful future is really rather apt when you consider everything that Stephen has been through and despaired at throughout the course of season 3. Here, he can act outside of the influence of the Doctor and do what he sees and feels is right, and the Doctor knows that and encourages it. Having gotten to know him as well as we have, we know that he's an excellent candidate. He has learnt so much from his travels, and while he may have fundamentally disagreed with the Doctor from time to time, it has always been because of the size of his heart. The departure itself is wonderfully underplayed too, and that isn't to say it isn't given weight, because it is. It just isn't made a meal of. Dodo's tears and the Doctor's stoical handshake and "I'm very proud of you" have enough emotion in them without having to dwell on it. I actually found it more moving than when the Doctor said goodbye to his own granddaughter. Purvis has been absolutely fantastic as Stephen, and time was he'd never have been able to jump ahead of Ian in my estimations. Now, spoilers for my season 3 roundup video, that both Stephen and Vicky have managed it over the course of season 3 is a surprise to me. But when I'm watching Doctor Who with the eyes I have now, it's very obviously only fair. And there's another surprise too. I've never disliked the Savages, but This was easily the most I've ever enjoyed it, and it has jumped up a hell of a lot of places in the ranking. Quite where it lies now, I'll save for the season 3 recap video. Got to save a few surprises, right? But just so you know, I have absolutely no qualms in now declaring this one of the very best First Doctor stories ever. So no, I've never disliked The Savages. I've always liked it, but now I love it. 122 episodes in now, and there are big changes afoot. We've lost a stalwart, and we finish season 3 with the next story where more changes lie in wait, and I may not be ready to face them. But as the end of this story reminds us,
we mustn't look back. I'm very proud of you.
stop incapacitating the Doctor. He's the hero, main character. So yeah, The Savages, once a 4-star story in the lower end of the 4-star stories, but now a 5-star classic. I am surprised by how much season 3 continues to surprise me on this marathon, but I am loving how much it is surprising me. I don't want to go into this marathon not being surprised. I don't want to watch another marathon of Doctor Who from start to finish and feel exactly the same way as the last time. I want this to happen. I want it to be different, and I'm loving all of the surprises that are being thrown up. As ever, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this stroll through the Scrublands, then you know how YouTube works. Please give it a like and spread the word. It really does help the channel enormously. The more the merrier. And what do you think of The Savages? Is it a forgotten classic, or is it as average as a missing season 3 sci-fi tale can get? Is Stephen Departure removing one, or did Peter Purvis deserve better? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you back here soon for the final story in season 3. So if you don't want to miss that, hit the subscribe button, clang the cloister bell, and I'll see you back here soon, back on Earth.